Hello everybody, and today we are going to start going a little further with polynomial functions. Last week, in the last couple weeks, we've talked about how to factor them, and we've talked about how to factor them in a multitude of ways. Now we're actually going to solve them, which means we're going to basically get our equation set equal to 0 and factor it if possible. And then, just like we did when we did quadratics, we'll set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Now, we've also talked a little bit about when we did the bounce wiggle cross about how there could be more than one solution at a spot on the x-axis, and that's called a repeated solution. So basically, if the solution repeats, that if you have x minus 2 and x minus 2 is a factor, that means that 2 is a solution twice. And if you're looking at a graph, how you know that is if the graph touches the x-axis, if it bounces, if you will, which is what we talked about. If the graph bounces, then it has a repeated solution at that value. Okay, so then we're going to actually find all of these zeros, real and imaginary. Sometimes you can just factor them and solve. Other times you might need to use Desmos to find the real solutions, and then we'll talk about how to use synthetic division, which we learned previously also, to find the imaginary and irrational solutions. And the first thing we're going to talk about is what's called the fundamental theorem of algebra, which tells us basically how many solutions we're going to be looking for in the end. So let's take a look at that. So the fundamental theorem of algebra, in simple terms, is whatever the highest degree of the polynomial is, tells you how many solutions you will have, including repeated solutions. So if you had x minus 2 times x minus 2, that would count as 2 solutions. 2 and 2, it would count twice. And it also includes imaginary and complex solutions. Okay, so a quick review of our factoring methods of what you might be looking for here is if it has 2 terms, remember you could have the difference of squares, you could have the difference of cubes, or you could have the sum of cubes. If there are 3 terms, you want to be thinking about greatest common factor first, and then think about traditional factoring where what times what equals and what plus what equals. You could also have to complete the square or use the quadratic formula. And then the other way that you might have to factor is by grouping if there are 4 terms. And we did all of that last week, and we did a flow chart. They reviewed it all, so hopefully these are all still in the back of your brain somewhere. Okay, so let's take a look. We're going to factor the polynomial to find the zeros. But using the fundamental theorem of algebra first, okay, I'm going to say, well, how many solutions are there? Well, the highest exponent is 3, which means I am looking for 3 solutions. I should get x equals 3 numbers when I'm all done. And remember, I'm looking at my problem here. I have it set equal to 0. That's my first step. Then I want to look and see if there's a greatest common factor. Well, in this case, on this problem, I can take out an x, and I'm left with x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 0. Okay, don't forget about this x out in front because that is one of your factors that's going to find you a 0. Okay, so that x has to stay there. And now I'm going to factor x squared minus 4x plus 4. So it might help if I'm thinking over here in my little thought bubble. It's 3 terms, which means I might need to be thinking what times what equals 4, and what plus what also equals 4, because those are the b and c value, equals negative 4. What plus what equals negative 4? Well, my factor pair is 2 times 2. If I use negative 2 and negative 2, that multiplies to be positive 4. And if I add negative 2 plus negative 2, it equals negative 4. So my factors are going to be x minus 2 and x minus 2 equals 0. Now I have 1, 2, 3 factors I need to set equal to 0. So I know that my first factor, x, equals 0. I also know that x minus 2 equals 0, or x minus 2 equals 0. And what I end up with is my 3 places, x equals 0, 2, and 2. So if I was going to graph this, okay, remember our zeros are where it crosses the x-axis. If I was going to graph this, my graph would cross at 0, and 2 it's an odd degree, it's a positive lead coefficient, so it would go it'd go through 0, come up somewhere, come back, bounce at 2, and keep going. Okay, we'll talk more about graphs a little bit later though. Okay, so then let's move on over here to the second one. First things first, let's count how many terms it has. It has 4 terms, which means I should be thinking factoring by grouping. Okay, I want to know how many solutions I'm looking for. Well, the highest exponent again is 3, which means I'm looking for 3 solutions when I am done. So let's go ahead and factor it. I'm going to go ahead and group it up here. Let me erase that. So I'm going to group my terms, and I've already have it set equal to 0, so we're good. My first group, I can take an x squared out, and I'm left with x minus 2. My second pair, I can take out a negative 4, and I'm left with a negative 16, sorry. I can take out a negative 16, and I'm left with x minus 2. Okay, when I write these factor pairs together, my first factor is going to be the ones I have in common. That is not saying that it's x minus 2 times x minus 2. That is one factor that I'm going to have, so I would have x minus 2 times x squared minus 16 equals 0. Right now, we are not done factoring, okay? If you notice, this is the difference of squares, which means I need to factor again, so that x minus 2 stays where it's at. And if I factor x squared minus 16, I get x minus 4 and x plus 4 equals 0. There's my 3 factors. If I set the first one equal to 0, I get x equals 2. If I set my second one equal to 0, I get x equals 4 and x equals negative 4. So my 3 solutions that I knew I had to have because the highest exponent is 3 are 2, 4, and negative 4. Okay, if you want to go ahead, pause the video, try these on your own really quick and see if you agree with what I get. I will put the solutions up here in just a minute, and if you have any questions or you are confused at all, please raise your hand, email me, or come ask me the question and I will help you out as best I can. Okay, go ahead and check what you have with what I have. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know. Okay, so the first video, there's actually 2 videos today. This is the first part, is just solving like this. So this is part 1 homework. There will be a part 2. Okay, so part 1 homework is for Mrs. Kreifels is Big Ideas Online. It is 4.5 in Big Ideas, so go ahead and go complete that. And then there'll be a second video on the second half of the lesson.